Chapter 1. The Departure Lounge. The platform at Victoria Station buzzed with the restless energy of departure. Porters darted through the crowd, their trolleys laden with leather suitcases and hat boxes, while the air thrummed with the hiss of steam and the low murmur of farewells. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his pinstriped suit and polished shoes, stood apart, his sharp eyes scanning the scene beneath the brim of his Homburg hat. The 5:40 to London was no ordinary train. It was a marvel of modern engineering, its sleek blue carriages gleaming under the station's iron canopy, promising luxury and secrets in equal measure. Poirot adjusted his waxed moustache with a gloved finger, his mind already cataloguing the passengers boarding the train. There was the young American heiress, Miss Clara Henshaw, her fur stole trailing behind her like a comet's tail, as she laughed too loudly with her nervous-looking companion, a mousy woman in spectacles. Nearby, a dour-faced clergyman, Reverend Mr. Thomas Fairchild, clutched a worn Bible, his lips moving silently as if in prayer. A portly businessman, Mr. Reginald Baxter, barked orders at a porter while checking his gold pocket watch with impatience. And then there was the elegant Lady Beatrice Marlowe, her emerald green dress a beacon of sophistication, though her eyes darted with a flicker of unease as she boarded. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured to himself, "the stage is set, and the players assemble. But what drama awaits, He stepped aboard, his small, precise steps carrying him into the opulent interior of the first-class carriage. Mahogany panels gleamed under soft electric lights, and velvet curtains framed windows that reflected the glittering chandeliers. The air carried the faint scent of lavender polish and expensive cigars. Poirot settled into his reserved seat, a corner nook perfect for observation, and opened his notebook, though he wrote nothing yet. His little grey cells, as he liked to call them, were already at work. A commotion at the carriage door drew his attention. A late arrival, a man in his 40s with a hawkish face and a tailored overcoat strode in, his eyes scanning the compartment with a predator's intensity. He carried no luggage, only a slim leather attaché case, which he gripped tightly. The conductor, a wiry man with a deferential bow, addressed him as Mr. Victor Langston and led him to a seat opposite Poirot. "Pardon, monsieur," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet, "but you seem a man in haste. Is the 5:40 to London of such importance to you?" Langston's eyes flicked to Poirot, assessing him in an instant. "Business waits for no man, sir," he replied curtly, his accent clipped and British. "And you are?" "Hercule Poirot," he said with a slight bow of his head, "a man who observes, and who finds the haste of others most intriguing." Langston's lips twitched, but he said nothing more, turning his attention to the window, as the train's whistle pierced the air. The carriage jolted, and with a rhythmic clatter, the 5:40 to London began its journey. Poirot's gaze drifted to the other passengers. Miss Henshaw was whispering urgently to her companion, who scribbled notes in a small diary. Reverend Fairchild sat rigid, his Bible now open but unread, his eyes fixed on Lady Marlowe, who was adjusting her gloves with exaggerated care. Mr. Baxter, meanwhile, had produced a flask from his coat and taken a discreet sip, his face flushed. "Curieux," Poirot muttered. "Each one plays a part, but what is the script?" As the train gathered speed, slicing through the dusky countryside, a young steward approached, offering flutes of champagne. Poirot declined with a polite wave, his attention caught by a faint sound, a sharp, stifled sob from the next carriage. It was fleeting, gone as quickly as it came, but Poirot's moustache twitched. The little grey cells stirred, "Something is not right," he said softly, his eyes narrowing. "The journey has begun, and already the shadow of mystery falls." "Hey, detective, quick question. Where in the world are you solving mysteries from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you want more twisted tales, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's case, it gets even creepier. Stay sharp. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Dining Car. The dining car of the 5:40 to London was a vision of decadence. Its tables draped in crisp white linen, silver cutlery glinting under crystal chandeliers. The clink of glasses and the soft hum of conversation mingled with the rhythmic clatter of the train as it sped through the twilight. Hercule Poirot, seated at a small table near the centre, sipped a cup of tisane, his eyes flitting from one passenger to another like a hawk surveying its domain. The little grey cells, as he called them, were alert, for the air carried the faint but unmistakable scent of deception. At a nearby table, Miss Clara Henshaw, the American heiress, held court with her companion, Miss Evelyn Grey, whose spectacles glinted as she leaned in to catch every word. Clara's voice, bright and brassy, carried just far enough to draw Poirot's attention. "Oh, Evelyn, darling, you must stop fretting. It's all arranged, I tell you. By the time we reach London, it'll be done." Her laugh was sharp, like glass breaking, and Evelyn's quick glance around the car betrayed her unease. "Oui, très intéressant," Poirot murmured, his moustache twitching. He made a mental note of Evelyn's trembling fingers as she clutched her napkin. Across the aisle, Lady Beatrice Marlowe sat alone, her posture regal but her eyes distant, fixed on the darkening landscape beyond the window. She toyed with a pearl necklace, her fingers lingering on a single, slightly misshapen pearl. Poirot noted the nervous gesture, wondering what weight such a small imperfection carried in her thoughts. The dining car grew quieter as the steward announced, "The first course, a delicate consommé." Poirot's attention shifted to a heated exchange at the far end of the car, where Mr. Reginald Baxter, the portly businessman, leaned toward Mr. Victor Langston, the late arrival with the hawkish face. Their voices were low, but Poirot's sharp ears caught fragments. "You're a fool if you think it's that simple," Baxter hissed, his face flushed from more than just the flask he'd been sipping earlier. "It's not just about the money. There's too much at stake." Langston's reply was colder, sharper. "Keep your voice down, Baxter." "You've already said too much. Let me handle it." Poirot tilted his head, pretending to study his soup spoon. "Handle what, I wonder?" he mused. The tension between the two men was palpable, like a taut wire ready to snap. Reverend Fairchild entered the dining car, his Bible tucked under his arm, and took a seat alone. He declined the consommé with a curt nod, his eyes darting toward Lady Marlowe, who seemed oblivious to his scrutiny. Poirot noted the clergyman's clenched jaw and the way his fingers traced the edge of his Bible, as if seeking solace, or perhaps absolution. As the meal progressed, Poirot overheard another snippet, this time from Clara Henshaw's table. Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried a tremor of fear. "Clara, what if someone finds out? What if he knows?" Clara's reply was airy, dismissive. "Nonsense, Evelyn. No one suspects a thing. And besides, it's too late to turn back now." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Too late for what, mademoiselle?" he thought, his fingers drumming lightly on the tablecloth. The dining car, for all its elegance, was a stage for secrets, each passenger playing a role in a drama Poirot had yet to fully decipher. As the steward cleared the plates, a sudden lurch of the train caused a glass to topple, spilling wine across Baxter's table. He cursed under his breath, mopping at the stain with a napkin, while Langston watched with a faint, unreadable smile. Poirot's gaze lingered on the napkin, where a faint smudge of ink, or was it something else, caught the light. "The little details," Poirot said softly to himself. "They are the threads that unravel the tapestry of crime." As the passengers began to disperse, Poirot rose, his tisane finished. He cast one last glance around the dining car, where whispers lingered like smoke. Something was brewing on this train, something dark and intricate, and Hercule Poirot was determined to uncover it before the 5:40 reached London. Chapter 3. The Locked Compartment. The 5:40 to London thundered through the night, its wheels a steady heartbeat against the rails. Hercule Poirot, having left the dining car, strolled through the narrow corridor of the first-class carriage, his polished shoes silent on the plush carpet. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood, and the faint tang of coal smoke seeping through a cracked shoe window. His little grey cells buzzed with the fragments of conversations he had overheard, each a puzzle piece yet to find its place. A sudden commotion broke his reverie. A steward, his face pale as the linen tablecloths, stumbled from a compartment ahead, his hands trembling as he clutched the doorframe. "Monsieur Poirot!" he gasped, recognizing the detective. "You must come, quickly! It's terrible!" Poirot's moustache twitched, his eyes sharpening. "Calm yourself, monsieur. What is this terrible thing?" The steward, a young man named Pierre, swallowed hard. "It's Mr. Langston. He's dead. In his compartment. The door was locked from the inside." "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his voice steady but his mind racing. "Show me at once." They hurried to compartment number 7, where a small crowd of passengers had begun to gather, drawn by the steward's distress. Miss Clara Henshaw stood wide-eyed, her fur stole slipping from her shoulders, while her companion, Miss Evelyn Grey, clutched her diary to her chest. Reverend Fairchild hovered at the edge, muttering a prayer, and Mr. Reginald Baxter pushed forward, his face flushed with curiosity or perhaps fear. Only Lady Beatrice Marlowe remained absent, her absence noted by Poirot's keen eye. Pierre fumbled with a master key, unlocking the compartment door with a click that echoed like a gunshot in the tense silence. The door swung open, revealing Victor Langston slumped in his seat by the window, his hawkish face frozen in a grimace. His leather attaché case lay open on the table before him, papers scattered like fallen leaves. The window was shut, the air heavy with the metallic scent of blood, though no wound was immediately visible. Poirot stepped inside, his small frame commanding the space. "Do not touch anything," he ordered, his voice firm. "Everyone, remain outside. Pierre, fetch the train's physician and the conductor at once." The steward nodded and darted away. Poirot knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers hovering over Langston's face. The man's eyes were open, staring blankly, and his lips were tinged faintly blue. No blood, no obvious wound, yet the pallor of death was unmistakable. Poirot's gaze swept the compartment. The scattered papers, a half-empty glass of brandy, a cigarette case with a single cigarette missing, and the locked door, locked from the inside as Pierre had said. "Curieux," Poirot muttered. "A man dies in a locked room, yet the key is in his pocket. How then does death enter?" He examined the papers in the attaché case, careful not to disturb them. Most were business documents, contracts, ledgers. But one sheet caught his eye. A handwritten note, torn at the edge with the words "Debts must be paid," scrawled in hurried ink. Poirot tucked the observation away, his mind already weaving connections. Clara Henshaw's voice broke the silence from the doorway. "Is it murder?" she asked, her tone a mix of fear and fascination. Poirot turned, his eyes piercing. "Mademoiselle, it is too early to say, but rest assured, Hercule Poirot will uncover the truth." Baxter snorted, folding his arms. "Looks like a heart attack to me. Man was under pressure. Business troubles, no doubt." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone neutral, but his gaze lingering on Baxter's flushed face. "But the heart, it does not lock a door behind itself." Reverend Fairchild cleared his throat, his voice low. "A tragic loss, but we must trust in divine justice." Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Divine or mortal, monsieur, justice will be served. Of that I am certain." As the conductor and physician arrived, Poirot stepped back, allowing them to examine the body. The physician, a bespectacled man with a grave expression, confirmed Langston's death, but could not immediately determine the cause. "No visible injuries," he muttered. "Possibly poison, but will need a proper autopsy." "Poison," Poirot repeated softly, his eyes narrowing. "Oui, that would explain much." The conductor, a stout man named Mr. Hargreaves, wrung his hands. "Monsieur Poirot, this is a disaster for the line. Will you assist us?" Poirot inclined his head. "Hercule Poirot does not turn away from a mystery, monsieur. I will find the truth, no matter how deeply it is hidden." As the crowd dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze fixed on the locked compartment. A locked door, a dead man, and a train full of secrets. This was a puzzle worthy of his little grey cells. The 5:40 to London had become a stage for murder, and Poirot was determined to unmask the killer before the final stop. Chapter 4. The interrogation begins. The first-class lounge of the 5:40 to London had been transformed into an impromptu interrogation room, its velvet-upholstered chairs arranged in a semicircle under the soft glow of chandeliers. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small, immaculate figure commanding the attention of the assembled passengers. The air was taut with unease, the rhythmic clatter of the train a constant reminder of their confinement. Victor Langston's death in the locked compartment had cast a pall over the journey, and Poirot's sharp green eyes missed nothing as he surveyed the faces before him. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but carrying an edge of authority. "A man is dead, and the circumstances, they are most unusual. Hercule Poirot will uncover the truth, but I require your cooperation. Each of you will speak, and each of you will be truthful, or the little grey cells, they will know." Miss Clara Henshaw, the American heiress, shifted in her seat, her fur stole slipping slightly. "This is dreadful," she said, her voice bright but brittle. "I barely knew the man. I was in the dining car all evening, wasn't I, Evelyn?" Miss Evelyn Grey, her companion, nodded quickly, her spectacles glinting. "Yes, Clara. We were together the whole time." Her fingers tightened around her diary, and Poirot noted the faint tremor in her hands. "Bon," Poirot said, his moustache twitching. "And what did you discuss, mademoiselle, during this time together?" Clara laughed, a touch too loudly. "Oh, nothing important. Fashion, gossip, the usual things. Evelyn's such a dear, always listening to my chatter." Poirot's gaze lingered on Evelyn, who looked down at her lap. "And you, Mademoiselle Grey? You agree this was the extent of your conversation?" Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. Just girl talk." "Girl talk," Poirot repeated softly, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. "We shall see." He turned to Mr. Reginald Baxter, the businessman, who sat with his arms crossed, his face still flushed from the wine. or perhaps from nerves. Monsieur Baxter, you were seen speaking with Monsieur Langston in the dining car. The conversation, it was heated, no?" Baxter snorted, loosening his tie. "Heated? Nonsense, just business talk. Langston owed me money, a debt from a deal gone sour. I pressed him about it, that's all." "A debt," Poirot mused, his fingers brushing his moustache. "And this debt, it was enough to cause such agitation." "It was a private matter," Baxter snapped, then softened his tone. "Look, I didn't like the man, but I didn't kill him. I was back in my compartment after dinner, alone." "Alone," Poirot echoed, making a mental note of Baxter's defensive posture. He turned to Reverend Thomas Fairchild, who sat clutching his Bible, his lips moving silently. "And you, Monsieur le Révérend? Where were you when Monsieur Langston met his fate?" Fairchild's eyes flicked up, meeting Poirot's with a steady gaze. "I was in my compartment, reading scripture. The Lord's words are my solace in times of trouble." "Trouble?" Poirot said, tilting his head. "And did you know Monsieur Langston, perhaps from before this journey?" Fairchild's jaw tightened. "I did not. I keep to myself, Monsieur Poirot. My concern is with the soul, not worldly affairs." "Yet you watched Lady Marlowe closely in the dining car," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing. "Why, I wonder." A murmur rippled through the group. Fairchild's face paled, but he recovered quickly. "I was merely concerned for her. She seemed distressed." Poirot nodded, filing away the clergyman's discomfort. He turned to Lady Beatrice Marlowe, who had joined the group late, her emerald green dress catching the light. "And you, Madame Marlowe? Where were you when the tragedy occurred?" Lady Marlowe's fingers paused on her pearl necklace, the misshapen pearl glinting. "I retired to my compartment after dinner," she said, her voice cool and measured. "I had a headache and wished to rest." "Alone?" Poirot asked, his eyes narrowing, slightly. "Of course," she replied, her gaze unwavering. "I had no reason to be elsewhere." Poirot smiled faintly, but his mind was at work. Each passenger had an alibi, yet each seemed to guard a secret. He addressed the conductor, Mr. Hargreaves, who stood nervously by the door. "Monsieur, the compartment was locked from the inside, oui? And no one entered or left after Monsieur Langston retired?" Hargreaves nodded vigorously. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot. The steward, Pierre, checked the corridor regularly. No one could have entered without being seen." "Curious," Poirot murmured. "A locked door, a dead man, and alibis that fit too neatly. The truth, it hides in the shadows of these words." He dismissed the passengers, asking them to remain in their compartments until further notice. As they dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze falling on the steward Pierre, who was wringing his hands. "Monsieur Pierre," Poirot said softly, "you seem most anxious. Is there something you wish to tell Hercule Poirot?" Pierre hesitated, then shook his head. "No, sir. It's just a man dead, on my train. It's terrible." "Oui, terrible," Poirot agreed, but his eyes lingered on the steward's trembling fingers. "But fear not. The truth, it will be found." As Poirot returned to his own compartment, his mind churned. Lies had been told, connections concealed. The passengers were bound by more than this train, and the death of Victor Langston was no accident. The little grey cells were at work, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until the puzzle was solved. Chapter 5. A Clue in the Carpet. The first-class carriage of the 5:40 to London swayed gently, its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to the tension that hung like fog in the air. Hercule Poirot stood alone in Victor Langston's locked compartment, number 7. the scene of the crime preserved as he had instructed. The conductor, Mr. Hargreaves, had ensured no one entered since the body was removed for examination by the train's physician. The compartment was a study in order, save for the scattered papers on the table and the faint lingering scent of brandy, and something sharper, almost medicinal. Poirot's sharp green eyes swept the space, taking in every detail. The polished mahogany panelling, the velvet curtains drawn tightly shut, the leather attaché case still open with its contents in disarray. The glass of brandy sat untouched since its discovery, its amber surface undisturbed. But it was the carpet, a rich burgundy patterned with gold fleur-de-lis, that drew Poirot's attention. He knelt, his gloved fingers brushing the pile, his moustache twitching as he noticed a faint irregularity. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "what do we have here?" With meticulous care, Poirot traced a small damp patch on the carpet, no larger than a shilling, near the base of the table. It was nearly invisible against the dark weave, but under the light of the compartment's lamp it glistened faintly. He leaned closer, his nose detecting a bitter chemical odour, distinct from the brandy. "Curieux," he said softly. "This is not a spill from the glass. No, this is something else entirely." Using a small pocket knife, Poirot carefully scraped a sample of the damp fibres into a handkerchief, folding it with precision. "A clue, perhaps, that speaks of poison," he mused. "But how did it come to be here, in a locked room?" He rose, his gaze returning to the table. The scattered papers included contracts and ledgers, as he had noted earlier, but the handwritten note with "debts must be paid" caught his eye again. He examined it closely, noting the torn edge. "This was not torn by accident," he said, his fingers tracing the jagged line. "Someone wished to remove a part of this message, but why?" Poirot's attention shifted to the cigarette case, silver and engraved with the initials VGL. One cigarette was missing, yet no ash or stub was visible in the compartment. He opened the case, revealing a row of neatly arranged cigarettes, but one slot was empty. "A smoker who does not smoke?" he wondered aloud. "Or perhaps the cigarette was taken by another." The compartment door creaked open, and Pierre the steward peered in, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, is there anything you need? The passengers, they are restless." Poirot turned, his expression unreadable. "Restless, you say? And you, Monsieur Pierre, you seem most unsettled. Tell me, did you enter this compartment after Monsieur Langston retired for the evening?" Pierre's eyes widened. "No, sir, I swear it. The door was locked, as I told you. I only checked the corridor, as is my duty." "Bon," Poirot said, his tone soothing but his eyes piercing. "And did you see anyone at all, near this compartment before the tragedy was discovered?" Pierre hesitated, his fingers twisting the edge of his uniform. I thought I saw someone, perhaps moving quickly down the corridor, but it was dark and I couldn't be sure. It might have been nothing." "Nothing," Poirot repeated, his voice soft but weighted. "In a matter of murder, monsieur, there is no such thing as nothing." Pierre nodded nervously and retreated. Poirot returned to his examination, his mind churning. The damp patch, the torn note, the missing cigarette, they were threads in a tapestry of deceit. He glanced at the locked door, its brass mechanism gleaming. "A locked room," he murmured, "yet someone entered, or someone ensured Monsieur Langston's fate from within. The little grey cells, they must work harder." As he left the compartment, locking it behind him, Poirot's thoughts turned to the passengers. Clara Henshaw's nervous laughter, Evelyn Grey's trembling hands, Baxter's defensive bluster, Fairchild's evasive piety, Lady Marlowe's cool detachment. Each held a piece of the puzzle. And now, this clue in the carpet, a whisper of poison, pointed to a method as subtle as it was deadly. The truth, Poirot said to himself, stepping into the corridor. It is close, but it hides behind a veil of lies. Hercule Poirot will lift that veil, no matter how cleverly it is woven. Chapter 6. The Lady's Confession. The 5:40 to London sped through the darkened countryside, its windows reflecting the golden glow of the first-class carriage's lamps. Hercule Poirot sat in the lounge, his notebook open but untouched, his little grey cells weaving together the threads of Victor Langston's murder. The damp patch on the carpet, the torn note, the missing cigarette, all pointed to a crime of precision and secrecy. Yet it was the passengers, with their guarded glances and half-truths, who held the key to the puzzle. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Lady Beatrice Marlowe stood at the entrance, her emerald-green dress catching the light, her pearl necklace gleaming with that single misshapen pearl. Her face, usually a mask of composure, betrayed a flicker of vulnerability. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "may I speak with you, privately?" Poirot rose, his expression courteous but alert. "Mais bien sûr, Madame Marlowe. Please, sit." He gestured to a chair opposite him, closing the lounge door to ensure privacy. She settled gracefully, her fingers tracing the pearl necklace. I must confess something," she began, her eyes fixed on the table. "I was not entirely truthful earlier about where I was when Mr. Langston died." Poirot's moustache twitched, but his face remained impassive. "Continue, madame. The truth it is always welcome to Hercule Poirot." Lady Marlowe took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly. "I knew Victor Langston, years ago in Paris. He was involved in a scandal that ruined my family. My brother Charles was his business partner. They invested in a venture that collapsed, and Langston betrayed him, leaving Charles to face the debts alone. My brother, he took his own life." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but his tone was gentle. "A tragedy, madame, and this history, it brought you to this train." She nodded, her fingers tightening on the misshapen pearl. "When I saw Langston board, I was shocked. I hadn't seen him in over a decade. I followed him to his compartment after dinner, intending to confront him, but the door was locked, and I heard no answer. I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I did not enter. I returned to my own compartment and stayed there." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "And this confrontation, madame, it was to be only words? Or did you seek justice?" Her eyes flashed with indignation. "I am no murderer, Monsieur Poirot. I wanted answers, not blood. But I couldn't face him. Not then. I was a coward." Her voice broke, and she looked away, her composure fraying. "Bon," Poirot said softly. "And this necklace, madame, it is significant, non? The pearl, it is not like the others." Lady Marlowe's hand froze on the misshapen pearl. "It was a gift from Charles," she said quietly. "The last thing he gave me before he was lost. I wear it to remember him." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. "Merci, Madame Marlowe, for your candour. But tell me, did you see anyone else near Monsieur Langston's compartment that night?" She hesitated, her lips parting as if to speak, then closed again. "I thought I saw someone, a shadow perhaps, moving quickly down the corridor. But it was dark, and I was distracted." "Curieux," Poirot murmured. "A shadow, much like the one the steward Pierre described. The truth, it begins to take shape." Lady Marlowe rose, smoothing her dress. "I've told you everything, Monsieur Poirot. I beg you, find who did this, for justice, if nothing else." Poirot inclined his head. Justice, madame, is the mission of Hercule Poirot. Rest assured, the truth will be found." As she left, Poirot's gaze lingered on the door. Her confession was a piece of the puzzle, but he suspected she still withheld something. The shadow in the corridor, mentioned by both Lady Marlowe and Pierre, was no coincidence. And the misshapen pearl, why did it hold such weight in her story? He opened his notebook, jotting a single word: motive. Lady Marlowe's tale of betrayal and loss gave her reason to hate Langston, yet her denial of murder rang true. But the other passengers, Clara Henshaw, Evelyn Grey, Reginald Baxter, Reverend Fairchild, each had their own secrets, their own reasons to wish Langston dead. Outside, the train's whistle pierced the night, a reminder of their relentless journey toward London. Poirot closed his notebook, his little grey cells buzzing. "The confession, it is a step," he said to himself, "but the path to truth is long and winding. Hercule Poirot will not falter." Chapter 7. Shadows of the Past. The 5:40 to London sliced through the night, its wheels humming a relentless tune against the rails. Hercule Poirot sat in his compartment, the soft glow of a single lamp illuminating his notebook, where cryptic notes in his precise handwriting mapped the web of clues surrounding Victor Langston's death: the damp patch on the carpet, the torn note, the missing cigarette, and now Lady Marlowe's confession. All pointed to a crime rooted in secrets long buried. Poirot's little grey cells churned, sensing that the victim's past held the key to the locked compartment's mystery. He summoned the conductor, Mr. Hargreaves, who arrived with a nervous shuffle, clutching a folder of passenger records. "Monsieur Hargreaves," Poirot said, his voice calm but commanding, "I require information about Monsieur Langston. His travels, his business, anything that might illuminate his associations." Hargreaves nodded, opening the folder. "Mr. Langston was a frequent traveller on this line, sir. A businessman dealing in imports, spices, textiles, that sort of thing. He often travelled to Paris, Istanbul, and London. Reserved, kept to himself, never caused trouble." "Never?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "And his companions? Did he travel with others?" Hargreaves hesitated. "Not often, but I recall he once shared a dining-car table with Mr. Baxter about a year ago. They seemed to know each other. And Miss Henshaw, she asked about him once, said she'd heard his name in New York." "Vraiment?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And what did Mademoiselle Henshaw say of him?" "She called him a shady character," Hargreaves said, lowering his voice. "Didn't elaborate, though." Poirot dismissed the conductor and turned to the scattered papers from Langston's attaché case, which he had requested be brought to him. Among the contracts and ledgers, he found a faded letter, its ink smudged but legible. It was addressed to Langston from a C. Marlowe, Lady Beatrice's brother Charles. The letter, dated 12 years prior, accused Langston of fraud, threatening legal action unless debts were repaid. "Debts must be paid," Poirot murmured, recalling the torn note. "The past, it casts a long shadow." He sought out Clara Henshaw next, finding her in the lounge with Evelyn Grey, the latter scribbling in her diary. Clara's fur stole was draped over her shoulders, her smile bright but strained. "Monsieur Poirot, have you caught the killer yet?" she asked, her tone teasing, but her eyes wary. "Not yet, mademoiselle," Poirot said, settling opposite her. "But I am curious. You knew of Monsieur Langston before this journey, oui? A shady character, I am told." Clara's laugh was sharp. "Oh, that! Just gossip from New York society. Everyone said Langston was a swindler, charming his way into deals and leaving others to clean up the mess. I never met him myself." Evelyn's pen paused, her hand trembling. Poirot's gaze flicked to her. "And you, Mademoiselle Gray? Did you share this opinion?" Evelyn pushed her spectacles up her nose. I don't know much about him. Clara's the one who hears all the gossip." "Yet you write so diligently in your diary," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "Perhaps you noted something about Monsieur Langston?" Evelyn clutched the diary tighter. "It's private, Monsieur Poirot. Just personal thoughts." Poirot nodded, but his mind catalogued her unease. He turned to Reginald Baxter, who was nursing a brandy in the corner. "Monsieur Baxter, you and Monsieur Langston were acquainted, no? A business deal, perhaps, that ended badly?" Baxter's face reddened. "I told you, it was just a debt. He owed me money from a failed venture in Istanbul. Spices, low quality, cost me a fortune, that's all. And this venture," Poirot pressed, "it involved others? Perhaps a certain Charles Marlowe?" Baxter froze, his glass halfway to his lips. "How did you— Look, that was years ago. Marlowe was a fool, trusted Langston too much, got what he deserved." "Deserved?" Poirot's voice was soft but sharp. "A strong word, monsieur, for a man who lost everything." Baxter looked away, muttering, "I didn't mean it like that." Poirot's next stop was Reverend Fairchild, who sat in his compartment, his Bible open but unread. "Monsieur le Révérend," Poirot said, "you claimed no knowledge of Monsieur Langston. Yet I sense you know more of this train's passengers than you admit." Fairchild's eyes met Poirot's, steady but guarded. "I minister to souls, Monsieur Poirot, not scandals. If Langston was a sinner, his judgment is with God." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but the judgment of murder, that is mine to uncover." As he left, Poirot's thoughts swirled. Langston's past tied him to Lady Marlowe's brother, to Baxter's failed deal, and to Clara's New York gossip. Evelyn's diary and Fairchild's evasions hinted at deeper secrets. The torn note, the damp patch, the missing cigarette. They were pieces of a puzzle rooted in betrayal and revenge. Outside, the train's whistle wailed, the countryside a blur of shadows. "The past," Poirot murmured, "it is the key." But whose hand turned it in the lock of death? Chapter 8. The Midnight Stop. The 5:40 to London shuddered to a halt, its wheels screeching against the rails in a jarring discord that shattered the midnight silence. Hercule Poirot, roused from his contemplations in his compartment, adjusted his silk dressing-gown and stepped into the corridor. The air was thick with the scent of coal dust and tension. The train's sudden stop an anomaly that set his little grey cells ablaze. Through the window, the darkened countryside loomed, a lonely signal post glowing faintly under a crescent moon. The conductor, Mr. Hargreaves, hurried past, his face etched with worry. "Monsieur Poirot," he called, spotting the detective. "There's been a signal failure, or so the engineer says. We're stopped until it's cleared." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A signal failure, you say? At this hour, in this place? Curieux. I shall investigate." He followed Hargreaves to the front of the train, where passengers had begun to gather in the corridor, their voices a murmur of confusion and irritation. Miss Clara Henshaw, wrapped in a silk shawl, leaned against a wall, her eyes darting nervously. "This is outrageous," she huffed. "What kind of luxury train stops in the middle of nowhere?" Her companion, Miss Evelyn Gray, clutched her diary, her spectacles fogging slightly in the cool night air. "It's unsettling," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Poirot's gaze swept the group. Reginald Baxter stood with his arms crossed, muttering about delays, while Reverend Fairchild gripped his Bible. his lips moving in silent prayer. Lady Beatrice Marlowe, poised as ever, joined them, her pearl necklace catching the dim light. But one face was missing. "Where is the steward, Pierre?" Poirot asked sharply, turning to Hargreaves. The conductor frowned. "He was checking the compartment, sir. I'll find him." Before Hargreaves could move, a shout echoed from the rear of the train. Poirot's head snapped toward the sound, his instincts flaring. He strode swiftly toward the source, the passengers trailing behind. At the rear door of the last carriage, the night air poured in, cold and sharp. The door stood ajar, and beyond it, a figure was stumbling across the gravel embankment, a small satchel slung over their shoulder. "Arrêtez!" Poirot called, his voice cutting through the darkness. The figure froze, then turned, revealing Pierre, the steward, his face pale and his eyes wide with panic. "Monsieur Poirot!" Pierre stammered, clutching the satchel. I was just checking the tracks, for safety." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his gloved hand gesturing to the satchel. "Safety, monsieur. In the dead of night, with a bag. Open it, s'il vous plaît." Pierre hesitated, his hands trembling, then slowly unfastened the satchel. Inside were a few personal items, a shirt, a watch, but nestled among them was a small glass vial, half filled with a clear liquid. Poirot's gaze locked onto it, his mind flashing to the damp patch on the carpet in Langston's compartment. "Mon Dieu," Poirot said softly. "And what is this, Monsieur Pierre? A memento of your duties?" Pierre's face crumpled. It's just medicine, sir, for my nerves, I swear." Poirot took the vial, holding it to the moonlight. "Medicine, or something more sinister? We shall see." He turned to Hargreaves. "Monsieur, ensure this vial is kept safe. It may hold the secret to Monsieur Langston's death." The passengers murmured, their eyes fixed on Pierre, who shrank under their scrutiny. Clara Henshaw gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while Baxter muttered, "Knew he was shifty." Lady Marlowe's expression remained unreadable, but her fingers brushed the misshapen pearl on her necklace. Poirot addressed Pierre, his voice calm but unyielding. "Why, monsieur, did you flee? A man does not run into the night unless he fears discovery." Pierre's shoulders slumped. I heard you talking about poison, Monsieur Poirot. I was afraid you'd think I did it. I found that vial in the corridor, near Langston's compartment after dinner. I didn't know what to do, so I kept it." "Found it?" Poirot's tone was sceptical. "And you did not think to inform me, or the conductor?" "I panicked," Pierre admitted, his voice breaking. I thought it might look bad for me." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It does, monsieur, but fear not. Hercule Poirot seeks the truth, not scapegoats." As Hargreaves escorted Pierre back to the train, Poirot lingered by the open door, his gaze sweeping the darkened landscape. The unscheduled stop, the fleeing steward, the mysterious vial, these were no accidents. Someone had orchestrated this moment, perhaps to distract or to dispose of evidence. But who? He returned to the carriage, the passengers dispersing to their compartments under Hargreaves's orders. Poirot's mind churned, the vial a new piece in the puzzle. Was Pierre a frightened witness, or a cunning accomplice? And the shadow seen by both Lady Marlowe and Pierre, did it belong to the killer, or another player in this deadly game? "The night grows darker," Poirot murmured, his fingers brushing his moustache. "But the light of truth, it will shine through." Chapter 9. The Missing Document. The 5:40 to London had resumed its journey, the rhythmic clatter of its wheels a steady pulse against the pre-dawn darkness. Hercule Poirot stood in Victor Langston's locked compartment, number 7. his gloved hands carefully sifting through the scattered papers on the table. The air was heavy with the faint scent of brandy, and the lingering chemical tang from the damp patch on the carpet. A clue now joined by the mysterious vial found in Pierre's satchel. But Poirot's little grey cells were troubled by a new anomaly, one that set his moustache quivering with suspicion. He had returned to the compartment to re-examine the papers from Langston's attaché case, particularly the torn note with the words "debts must be paid." It was gone. The contracts, ledgers, and other documents remained, but the handwritten note, the one linking to Lady Marlowe's tragic past and Baxter's failed deal, was missing. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he scanned the table, then the floor, even lifting the edge of the carpet. Nothing. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "someone has tampered with the scene. The document, it has been taken to conceal a truth." He summoned the conductor, Mr. Hargreaves, who arrived with a harried expression. "Monsieur Hargreaves," Poirot said, his voice calm but edged with steel, "who has had access to this compartment since last I was here?" Hargreaves paled. "No one, Monsieur Poirot, I swear. The door was locked, and I kept the master key with me. Only the steward, Pierre, and the physician have been inside, and that was with you present." "And yet," Poirot said, holding up a hand, "a vital piece of evidence is gone. This is no accident, monsieur. Someone has been clever, too clever." Poirot's mind raced. The missing note suggested a deliberate act to obscure Langston's past, but who among the passengers had the opportunity? Pierre, caught fleeing with the vial, was an obvious suspect, but his panic seemed genuine. Lady Marlowe, with her connection to the note's author, had motive to hide it. Baxter, tied to Langston's debts, might wish to erase evidence of their feud. Even Clara Henshaw or Evelyn Grey, with their secretive whispers, could be involved. And Reverend Fairchild's pious detachment felt increasingly like a mask. Poirot stepped into the corridor, where the passengers were gathered in the lounge, their faces a mix of fatigue and unease after the midnight stop. He addressed them, his voice commanding attention. "Mesdames et messieurs, a document has vanished from Monsieur Langston's compartment, a document that speaks of debts and betrayal. One of you knows of this. I urge you to speak now. For the truth, it will not remain hidden." Clara Henshaw's laugh was nervous. "A document? Monsieur Poirot, we've been in our compartments or here under your watchful eye. How could anyone take anything?" Her companion, Evelyn Grey, clutched her diary, her spectacles slipping down her nose. Perhaps it was misplaced," she ventured, her voice barely a whisper. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. "Misplaced, mademoiselle?" "Non, the hand that took it knew its value." Reginald Baxter snorted, his face flushed. "This is ridiculous. You're accusing us without proof. I was in my compartment, sleeping, after that blasted stop." Reverend Fairchild cleared his throat, his Bible held tightly. "Monsieur Poirot, we are all weary. Perhaps the note was lost in the confusion of the night." Lady Marlowe, her fingers brushing the misshapen pearl on her necklace, spoke softly. "I have nothing to hide, Monsieur Poirot. If this note concerns my brother, I would want it found, not lost." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, madame. But the truth, it is like a shadow. It moves when you least expect it." He turned to Pierre, who stood at the edge of the group, his face drawn. "Monsieur Pierre, you were seen near this compartment before the stop. Did you perhaps take something to protect yourself?" Pierre shook his head vehemently. "No, sir. I found the vial, as I told you, but I touched nothing else. I swear it." Poirot nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The missing document was a deliberate act, timed with the midnight stop to create chaos. Someone had slipped into the compartment, perhaps during the distraction of Pierre's flight. But how, with the door locked? The answer lay in the details: the vial, the carpet, the cigarette case, and the secrets each passenger guarded. As the passengers dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze falling on the corridor's carpet, where a faint scuff mark caught his eye. It was near Langston's door, barely noticeable, but it suggested a hurried step. "The little grey cells," he murmured. "They see what others overlook." The train's whistle sounded, signalling their approach to a station, though London was still hours away. Poirot's resolve hardened. The missing document was a challenge, but Hercule Poirot would not be outwitted. The truth was close, hidden in the shadows of motive and opportunity, and he would find it before the journey's end. Chapter 10. The Confrontation. The first-class lounge of the 5:40 to London was a stage set for drama, its velvet chairs and polished mahogany tables bathed in the soft glow of chandeliers. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small, immaculate figure commanding the attention of the assembled passengers. The air was thick with anticipation, the rhythmic clatter of the train underscoring the tension that had built since Victor Langston's death. The missing document, the vial of poison, the torn note, all were pieces of a puzzle Poirot was ready to partially unveil, to stir the guilty into revealing themselves. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady and resonant. "The death of Monsieur Langston was no accident, nor a simple tragedy of the heart. It was murder, executed with precision in a locked compartment, and the truth, it is closer than you think." A murmur rippled through the group. Clara Henshaw, her fur stole slipping, clutched Evelyn Grey's arm. Evelyn's spectacles glinted as she stared at Poirot, her diary gripped tightly. Reginald Baxter leaned back, his face flushed, while Reverend Fairchild's fingers tightened on his Bible. Lady Beatrice Marlowe sat poised, her misshapen pearl catching the light, her eyes unreadable. Pierre, the steward, hovered at the edge, his face pale. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the whispers. "I have uncovered much. A note, speaking of debts, was taken from the scene, a note tied to a past of betrayal. A vial of poison, found in Monsieur Pierre's possession, matches the scent on the carpet where Monsieur Langston died. And a cigarette, missing from a case, suggests a hand that moved in secret. But there is more. Monsieur Langston was a man who left ruin in his wake, debts unpaid, lives destroyed. Each of you, I believe, has a connection to this ruin." Clara gasped, her voice sharp. "That's absurd! I barely knew the man." Poirot's gaze fixed on her. "Yet you spoke of him as a shady character, mademoiselle. And you, Mademoiselle Grey, your diary, does it hold only personal thoughts, or secrets of another kind?" Evelyn's hands trembled, her voice a whisper. I've done nothing wrong." Poirot turned to Baxter. "Monsieur Baxter, your failed venture with Langston cost you dearly. Anger. It is a powerful motive, non?" Baxter's face reddened. "I told you it was just business. I didn't kill him." "And you, Monsieur le Révérend," Poirot continued, his eyes on Fairchild. "Your prayers, they seem fervent, yet you watched Madame Marlowe with purpose. Did you know of her brother's fate, tied to Langston's treachery?" Fairchild's jaw tightened. "I seek only to guide, Monsieur Poirot. I knew nothing of Langston." Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Marlowe. "Madame, you confessed to a past with Langston, a brother lost to his betrayal. Yet you saw a shadow near his compartment. Was it only a shadow, or something more?" Lady Marlowe's fingers paused on her pearl necklace. "I've told you all I know," she said coolly. Finally, Poirot turned to Pierre. "And you, Monsieur Pierre, fled with a vial of poison. A guilty act or one of fear?" Pierre's voice cracked. "I found it, I swear. I didn't kill him." Poirot stepped forward, his voice rising. "One of you lies. The poison, the note, the locked door. These are not coincidences. Someone here orchestrated Langston's death, and I, Hercule Poirot, will unmask you. But first, I offer this. Confess now, and the truth may be kinder." The lounge fell silent, the air electric. Then a sudden movement. Evelyn Grey's diary slipped from her hands, hitting the floor with a thud. Pages fluttered open, revealing a sketch of a man's face, strikingly similar to Langston's, with the word debts scrawled beneath it. Clara gasped, pulling away from Evelyn. "Evelyn, what is that?" Evelyn scrambled to retrieve the diary, her face ashen. "It's nothing, just a doodle." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A doodle, mademoiselle, or a confession of your own?" Baxter stood, his voice booming. "She's hiding something, look at her." Fairchild murmured a prayer, while Lady Marlowe's gaze sharpened, fixed on Evelyn. Pierre shrank back, his hands trembling. Poirot raised a hand. "Enough! Mademoiselle Grey, your diary will be examined. The truth, it cannot be hidden forever." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing, clutching the diary to her chest. The other passengers exchanged glances, suspicion crackling like static. Poirot dismissed them, his mind racing. Evelyn's reaction was a crack in the facade, but was she the killer, or another pawn in a larger game? The missing document, the vial, the shadow in the corridor. These threads were tightening, and the guilty party was growing desperate. As the passengers dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze on the diary's fallen page, now tucked away. "The little grey cells," he murmured. "They see the pattern forming. The truth, it is near." Chapter 11. The Final Clue. The 5:40 to London hurtled toward its destination, the dawn light casting pale streaks through the carriage windows. Hercule Poirot sat in the first-class lounge, his notebook open, its pages filled with cryptic notes and diagrams that mapped the web of Victor Langston's murder. The damp patch on the carpet, the missing document, the vial of poison, Evelyn Grey's revealing diary sketch. All were pieces of a puzzle now nearing completion. Yet one final clue, Poirot sensed, would unravel the killer's motive and method. His little grey cells hummed with anticipation. The passengers, confined to their compartments under Poirot's orders, were restless. Their alibis and secrets strained under the weight of his accusations. Evelyn Grey's diary, now in Poirot's possession, lay on the table before him. He opened it carefully, noting the sketch of Langston's face and the word debts scrawled beneath. But it was a faint, almost imperceptible mark on the opposite page that caught his eye. A smudge of ash, barely a speck, with a faint acrid scent. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his moustache twitching. "The cigarette! The missing cigarette from Monsieur Langston's case! Could it be—" He recalled the cigarette case in Langston's compartment. Its single empty slot, a silent accusation. No ash, no stub had been found, yet this smudge in Evelyn's diary suggested a connection. Poirot's mind flashed to the vial of poison, the damp patch on the carpet, and the locked door. "The cigarette," he said softly. "It was not smoked, but used. A delivery for death, perhaps." He summoned the conductor, Mr. Hargreaves, and requested the vial found in Pierre's satchel. Hargreaves returned promptly, handing over the small glass container, its clear liquid glinting ominously. Poirot held it to the light, then carefully opened Evelyn's diary to the ashen smudge. "Monsieur Hargreaves," he said, "fetch the train's physician. I must know the nature of this poison, and quickly." As Hargreaves hurried away, Poirot revisited the corridor outside Langston's compartment, his eyes scanning the carpet where he had noticed a scuff mark earlier. Kneeling, he examined it closely, his gloved fingers brushing the fibres. There, caught in the weave, was a tiny fragment of paper, no larger than a postage stamp, with a faint ink mark, a torn edge that matched the missing note's jagged line. "Vraiment," Poirot said, his voice a whisper. "The document was not taken far. It was destroyed, but not entirely." He pocketed the fragment, his mind racing. The ash in the diary, the poison in the vial, the torn paper, these were no coincidences. The killer had used the cigarette as a vehicle for the poison, perhaps soaked in the deadly liquid and placed in Langston's case, ensuring he would inhale or ingest it unknowingly. The locked door was a ruse, the poison administered before Langston retired, the note torn to hide its full message. Poirot returned to the lounge, where the physician, Dr. Wells, awaited with a preliminary analysis. "Monsieur Poirot," the doctor said, adjusting his spectacles, "the vial contains a fast-acting alkaloid poison, likely cyanide-based. Inhaled or ingested, it would cause death within minutes, with symptoms like those we observed. Blue lips, no visible wounds." Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming. And if this poison were absorbed into, say, a cigarette? Would it leave a trace, perhaps ash, with a distinct scent? Dr. Wells frowned, then nodded. Yes, it's possible. The ash would carry a chemical residue, faintly acrid. "Bon," Poirot said, his voice triumphant. "The final clue, it is found. The cigarette, laced with poison, was the instrument of murder. And the diary, it points to the hand that placed it." He turned to Evelyn's diary, the smudge of ash now a beacon. Evelyn Gray, with her nervous demeanour and secretive scribbles, had been near Langston's compartment. Her diary, a record of more than thoughts. But was she the killer, or a witness manipulated by another? The torn paper fragment suggested someone else had been in the corridor, someone desperate to conceal the note's full message. Poirot closed the diary, his resolve hardening. The motive, it lies in the past, debts, betrayals, and a shadow that moves among us. The killer is clever, but Hercule Poirot is more so. The train's whistle sounded, signalling their approach to London, now only hours away. Poirot knew the time for revelation was near. The final clue had illuminated the path, and the guilty party could no longer hide. With the passengers gathered, he would unveil the truth, and the tapestry of lies would unravel. Chapter 12. The Revelation. The first-class lounge of the 5:40 to London was charged with anticipation, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over the assembled passengers. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small, immaculate figure radiating authority, his green eyes sharp as they swept over the faces before him. The train's rhythmic clatter underscored the silence, the dawn light now brightening the windows as London drew near. The clues, the damp patch, the missing document, the poisoned cigarette, the diary's ash, the torn note, had led Poirot to this moment. The truth was ready to be unveiled. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding, "a murder has been committed on this train, in a locked compartment, with a precision that seemed impossible. Yet Hercule Poirot has unravelled the mystery. Victor Langston was poisoned, not by chance, but by a hand driven by vengeance. The killer is among us, and now the little grey cells will reveal all." The passengers sat rigid. Clara Henshaw, her fur stole askew, Evelyn Grey clutching her diary, Reginald Baxter, his face flushed, Reverend Fairchild, his Bible closed, Lady Beatrice Marlowe, her pearl necklace glinting, and Pierre, the steward, pale and trembling. Poirot raised a gloved hand. "Let us begin with the method. Monsieur Langston died in a locked compartment, with no visible wounds, his lips tinged blue. The vial of cyanide-based poison, found in Monsieur Pierre's satchel, matched the scent on the carpet's damp patch. But how was it administered? A cigarette, missing from Langston's case, was the key. It was laced with poison, placed in his case before he retired, ensuring he would inhale or ingest the fatal dose." Clara gasped. "A cigarette? But who could do such a thing?" Poirot's gaze flicked to her. "Patience, mademoiselle. The cigarette left a trace, ash, found in Mademoiselle Grey's diary, with the sketch of Langston and the word debts. This suggested Mademoiselle Grey's involvement, no?" Evelyn's voice trembled. "I didn't kill him. I only drew him because I overheard Clara talking about him." Poirot nodded. "Oui, and this brings us to motive. Monsieur Secession Langston was a man of debts and betrayals. Madame Marlowe's brother Charles was ruined by him, ending in tragedy. Monsieur Baxter lost a fortune in a failed venture. Mademoiselle Henshaw knew of his reputation. Even Monsieur Pierre found a vial near his compartment. But the note, 'Debts must be paid,' tied these threads together, its torn edge a sign of concealment." Baxter snorted. "Get to the point, Poirot. Who did it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. The note was taken, but a fragment remained, found in the corridor. It was destroyed by someone desperate to hide its full message, a message naming a partner in Langston's crimes. This partner, I deduced, was among us. Lady Marlowe's fingers stilled on her pearl. "Monsieur Poirot, you cannot mean—" Poirot turned to Reverend Fairchild, his voice cutting like a blade. "Monsieur le Révérend, you claimed no knowledge of Langston, yet your eyes followed Madame Marlowe, whose brother was his victim. Why? Because you were Charles Marlowe's confidant, non? You knew of Langston's betrayal, for Charles confessed it to you before his death." Fairchild's face paled, his Bible slipping. I only offered spiritual guidance." "No," Poirot said sharply. "You were more. The note, its full text recovered from memory by Madame Marlowe, named you as Langston's silent partner in the fraud that ruined Charles. You profited, then hid behind a clergyman's collar, but guilt drove you to this train. You laced Langston's cigarette with poison from the vial, administered it before he locked his door, and took the note to conceal your name." A stunned silence fell. Fairchild's voice cracked. "You have no proof!" Poirot held up the vial. "The ash in Mademoiselle Grey's diary came from handling the poisoned cigarette, which you dropped near her compartment to cast suspicion. The shadow in the corridor, seen by Madame Marlowe and Pierre, was you retrieving the note. The locked door was a deception. The poison acted slowly, giving you time to leave." Fairchild stood, trembling. I couldn't let him live. He destroyed Charles, mocked his death. I took justice into my own hands." Lady Marlowe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Clara and Evelyn stared, wide-eyed. Baxter swore under his breath, and Pierre sagged with relief. Poirot's voice softened. "Justice, monsieur, is not yours to wield. You killed a man, however guilty, and for that you will face the law." Hargreaves stepped forward, restraining Fairchild, who slumped, defeated. The passengers sat in stunned silence, as Poirot continued. "The little grey cells have spoken. The truth is clear." As the train neared London, the weight of the revelation settled over the lounge. Poirot's gaze lingered on Fairchild, his expression one of sorrowful triumph. "The heart of man is complex, but justice, it is simple." Chapter 13. Epilogue. The Journey's End. The 5:40 to London glided into Victoria Station with a final, weary sigh of steam, its blue carriages gleaming under the morning sun. The platform bustled with porters and passengers, but within the first-class carriage, a sombre stillness lingered. Hercule Poirot stood by the window, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his sharp green eyes reflecting the scene outside. The murder of Victor Langston had been solved, the killer, Reverend Thomas Fairchild, unmasked, and now in the custody of the authorities awaiting them at the station. Yet Poirot's little grey cells remained restless, pondering the complexities of justice and human nature. The passengers, released from the tension of the journey, disembarked with subdued expressions. Miss Clara Henshaw, her fur stole draped carelessly, clutched Evelyn Grey's arm, their whispered conversation no longer secretive, but tinged with relief. Evelyn's diary, its incriminating ash explained, had been returned to her, though her nervous glances suggested the ordeal had left its mark. Reginald Baxter, his face still flushed, muttered about business and hurried away, eager to escape the shadow of suspicion. Lady Beatrice Marlowe, her emerald green dress as poised as ever, paused to nod at Poirot, her misshapen pearl catching the light, a silent acknowledgment of the truth about her brother's betrayal. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, her voice steady but heavy, "you have given me closure, though it is a bitter kind. My brother's memory is clearer now, even if the pain remains." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame, the truth, it is often a bitter medicine, but it heals. Your brother, he would be glad you wear his pearl." She smiled faintly and stepped onto the platform, disappearing into the crowd. Poirot's gaze lingered on her retreating figure, his thoughts turning to Fairchild. The Reverend's confession had revealed a man consumed by guilt, his pious facade a shield for the shame of profiting from Langston's fraud. The poisoned cigarette, the torn note, the vial, all were tools of a desperate act, not of divine justice, but of human vengeance. The conductor, Mr. Hargreaves, approached, his face weary but grateful. "Monsieur Poirot, the railway owes you a debt. Without you, this tragedy would have tarnished us all." Poirot waved a hand dismissively. "Non, monsieur. It is the order of things that Hercule Poirot restores. A crime, it cannot be permitted to hide in the shadows." As Hargreaves left to oversee the luggage, Poirot's thoughts turned to Pierre, the steward, who had been cleared of suspicion. The vial he found was indeed a plant by Fairchild, meant to divert attention, but Pierre's panic had nearly cost him his freedom. Poirot had ensured his name was cleared, though the young man's shaken demeanour suggested he would not soon forget the 5:40 to London. Stepping onto the platform, Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, the morning air crisp against his face. The station's clamour felt distant, his mind still in the locked compartment, piecing together the final threads. The cigarette, laced with cyanide, had been a masterful touch, requiring access and cunning. Fairchild's knowledge of Langston's habits, gained through Charles Marlowe's confessions, had made it possible. The torn note, meant to erase his name, had instead led Poirot to the truth. Its fragment, a silent witness. "Man seeks justice," Poirot murmured, his moustache twitching, "but often it is vengeance in disguise. The heart, it is a labyrinth, and only the little grey cells can navigate it." As he walked toward the station's exit, a porter carrying his small valise in tow, Poirot felt the weight of the case lift. The 5:40 to London had been a stage for human frailty, greed, betrayal, guilt, but also for truth. He had unmasked the killer, restored order, and given voice to the silent. It was enough. The city of London sprawled before him, alive with possibility. Poirot smiled faintly, his steps light. Another mystery awaited, another puzzle for the little grey cells. For now, though, the journey was complete, and Hercule Poirot was content.